It's time for the panel session on AI readiness. This group of leaders will help guide you on your journey. First up on the AI readiness panel is Pallavi Agarwal. As the CEO and founder of Candor, she's a visionary who is helping transform the Salesforce ecosystem. Pallavi's expertise lies in implementing Salesforce through strategy and design thinking, empowering organizations to unlock the full potential of their data. With her vast experience in program management and consulting, she's here today to shed light on the GPT revolution and its profound implications for Salesforce professionals. Next up is Vernon Keenan. As a long-standing key figure in the Salesforce ecosystem, Vernon has provided strategic advisory services and foresight, accurately predicting the rise of internet giants like eBay and Amazon. Today, he's here to guide Salesforce professionals and organizations on how to take advantage of GPT tech and get prepared for AI. You will come to appreciate his strong DevOps framework and eagerness to share. Vernon and Pallavi will be joined by Andrew Cook. Andrew is a Salesforce technical instructor at Salesforce Bend with a wealth of experience and many Salesforce professional certifications to show for it. He's also a GPT trailblazer who's taken the dive, discovered great use cases, and is ready to share his insights on AI readiness. We are excited to hear his viewpoint on how to prepare. To round out our panel, we welcome Nick Ham. He's a CEO, Salesforce MVP Hall of Famer, and the driving force behind 10K Advisors, where the future of work converges with Salesforce ecosystem. With a background spanning engineering, marketing, sales, and consulting, he's here to help demystify AI and share his expertise. Helping to moderate is Ian Gotts from Elements.cloud. He has extensive experience as a moderator, and be sure to catch his session tomorrow to learn more about his background. Thank you to all the panelists, and welcome to the stage.
Right, thank you so much for joining us for this session. So let's get started. Pallavi, you're a consultant out there in the field dealing with clients all the time. So everyone's saying AI is here, we're all using it. How true is that? How well prepared do you think clients are?
So I think AI has been around for a long time and people have been using it. The real stuff that we're talking about these days is generative AI. And for our customers, a lot of them, especially in the service side of things where they're using Service Cloud, I think it's very relevant for them because it's ways for them to standardize how to message things out from their agent's perspective, create norms, and be able to give a standard level of service versus what each agent, how they might depict a response. However, to get them ready for it, I don't think they're there yet, right? Because it all goes back to, if you remember back in the day when we were talking about chatbots, it's like, everyone's like, I want a chatbot, let's start plugging that in. And it's like, well, you need a knowledge base first. And with AI and generative AI, it's the same thing. We need to have our data where it needs to be and continue to hone in on that data in a way that it's constantly iterative and learning and really working with the business in the best way possible. And a lot of our customers that we see, the data quality isn't there yet. And that's where we're working on and preparing them for the next phase.
Nick, are you seeing the same thing, or are your customers more ready?
I would echo the same. I would say a lot of folks are exploring and curious, but very few that I've seen take very concrete steps to build capabilities on their own. Certainly, people are interested, when we offer to talk about it or have some things to share. But of the dozens and dozens of customers that we work with on a daily basis, I can't really name more than a handful that have built any really concrete use cases that are in production and really making a difference live in their environments today.
So that's echoing the message that we're hearing from Salesforce, which is let's get started, let's do the prep, rather than everyone's doing this and let's see some examples. So what do you think is holding people back? I mean, Vernon, you're an industry analyst, so you're taking a slightly different perspective, but what's holding companies back?
Well, what's holding Salesforce customers back primarily is the fact we mainly have promises and don't have product yet. So it's a nice architecture, I think. Others in the analyst community see Salesforce as perhaps having the best integrated data stack and enterprise stack when it comes to AI, because the org itself has security properties within it. So you can have all kinds of security models built into your org, and that can be reflected in how you are using data. And they've architected it with the Einstein GPT trust layer and other things within the architecture shows them to have their act together. But if you look at what they've actually shipped, the sales email and a service cloud integration, it's really very, very primitive prompt engineering is what they're doing there. And they've really kind of rolled out a very, very basic capability. So I don't see the value in paying for AI yet, is probably one of the big things holding people back.
So it's definitely taking you off Mark's Christmas card list, I would have thought.
Well, you know, I still think the analyst community still loves Salesforce for the future. And I think the practical thing is that you've got a Q1, Q2 availability horizon for deep Salesforce integrations. And also in my keynote this week earlier, I mentioned a price list and a document, an AI readiness document you can get from Salesforce. And that you want to look at that and understand which licenses you need and what kind of capabilities you need. And also, you know, it was mentioned how they're talking about all their other AI capabilities, and they're kind of mushing all these things together into like a giant price list. So I think it's for generative AI, Salesforce customers don't have any other choices right now than third-party integrations, in my view.
So, I mean, back to sort of the two consultants in the room, Pallavi and Nick. So it feels like there's actually a lot of work for you to actually get people actually pointed in the right direction. I mean, the confused mind often says no, and I think there's a level of confusion out there.
Yeah, I think a lot of folks, I mean, there's just so much activity around this right now, and every day there's a new model or a new company or a new capability that's coming out. And even for those of us that try to stay on top of all this, it's hard to stay on top of it all, right? I couldn't tell you how many X GPT things that Salesforce is talking about releasing, right? And that's just what Salesforce has, regardless of what else is out there in the market. So yeah, I think long term there's a lot of capabilities, but I think to hit on something that Pallavi said earlier, right? You have to have data readiness for this, right? That is the core for being able to do anything with AI, is to have data, put data into AI, get data out, right? And if you don't have good data, which most Salesforce customers do not, then you're not going to get really any value out of it. And so I think for consultants, really the hill that we have to climb is, you know, number one, educating customers on how to build the foundation to get ready for AI, and sort of convince them a little bit that yes, while you want to be driving 60 miles an hour down the highway, like we have to teach you how to drive first, and we have to, you know, do all those things in order to get you prepared for that, and convince them that that's worth that investment, and really lay out that roadmap. So while yes, I agree, long term, there's a lot of potential. There's also sort of a lot of behind the scenes grunt work that needs to be done to really realize that.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, like some of the other things outside of just the data and the data readiness is figuring out your security policies and guidelines, right? Like, how are we boxing this in? Some of our customers, they work with the federal agency. So for them, data security is a very key issue. And even though they want to get in on the Einstein ChatGPT stuff that's Salesforce has already put out, we're already exploring those options to kind of see how the technology will play out. But in parallel, we're also looking at policies, procedures, guidelines, and really thinking of the decisions and the criteria we need to have for each of our clients and their policies for their companies, how they interact, what's allowed, what's not allowed, building around that, and not just allowing OpenAI to integrate directly into their orgs. So that's another key thing that we need to take into consideration.
Yeah, I think one thing I've noticed is that there is no security frameworks out there for people to really understand what is at stake for using an online service like OpenAI or Azure Cognitive Services or Vertex AI or whatever, SageMaker, whatever. So right now, if you're doing this stuff, you got to kind of step back a little bit and make your own security framework. And, you know, there's some key things you can hit on that. I won't go into that. It was in my keynote as well. But I think that's one thing the most Salesforce program managers and, you know, platform owners should be looking at. If they're going to be connecting anything to their org, you got to have a security framework to kind of hit the check boxes on your own right now.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
I just sorry, I was going to say one more thing about that, because I think what Pallavi said is, you know, that's where actually we started at 10K, you know, and I think a lot of other companies are thinking about this as well. Like, we have this community of, you know, 700 experts around the world who we know are using their own AI tools out there, right? Regardless of what we might provide. And so really the first step for us was to really ensure that we're educating our community on what to do, what not to do, especially what not to do with those tools and data and those sorts of things. And I think that's a really concrete first step that companies need to take, is to really think about educating their entire workforce on, you know, you don't have to teach them what large language models are. They can go to chatgpt.com and sort of figure out what it is without knowing how it works. But that's kind of the problem too, is they can go to that and they can put your customer data in there and they can put your proprietary data in there, and they might not really understand what they're doing when they do that. So I think, you know, it's important for executives and everyone at these companies to understand that people are using these, whether they've provided that capability or not, and they need to give folks guidance on best practices and especially what not to do.
yeah, and I think that's why the adoption is going to be a little slow around this as well. From you know, like if I just being in DC, the government's right in my backyard, so I always think about the adoption there, and you know, it's going to be probably a decade before they even think about it, just given all of the security firewalls restrictions that they have. And then you look at big enterprises that are on a global scale, they're probably going to be late to adoption, because to define these policies, guidelines takes time, because it is the wild, wild west, as we were talking about it, right? So I think it's going to be looking at some of those key examples in industries on how people have used it, and those early adopters who are really going to be paving the way on that security protocol, and really educating people on this is what's working for us, and there it's going to be trial by fire to a certain degree.
I think Salesforce Ben, I mean, Andrew, Salesforce Ben, I think you've got an important role there at Salesforce Ben to start to educate the ecosystem. So you talk about some of the things that you're thinking about in terms of how AI is working.
Yeah, so I think that one of the big things at the moment is trust. I don't think enough people trust it as a technology. I mean, the example case with Samsung was well documented, when some of their engineers used ChatGPT to help them with tasks and unknowingly gave away a load of trade secrets. So I think that any large enterprise will have seen that and thought, well, I'm not I'm not going to do that as well. Let's wait and see what so I think as well, that's one of the really exciting things about the Salesforce trust layer, is that it kind of gives that peace of mind for people, in that they don't need to worry about they can focus on the positives of the technology rather than having to worry more on the negatives, which I think a lot of people at the moment are doing.
People are saying, okay, enterprises aren't adopting this, but they kind of are actually through the individuals. I've been talking about like stealth GPT, which is like someone saying you're absolutely not allowed to use it because I work for company X, I work for Uber, and we've decided we're not using ChatGPT, or we're not using one of these services. But then an employee is sitting there. So, I'm not saying that Uber is, I just use this as an example, as an enterprise. But someone in Uber is going, well, actually, I'm going to use this on my laptop. So I think that, or on your phone, absolutely, Nick. So the point is well made about we need some policies. And I talked about PASTA. Right? So how do you actually get ahead of this if you're a CIO? So PASTA, P is have some policies in place. And then A is have an amnesty. Tell me what you're all doing. I won't stop you, but tell me what you're all doing. We won't penalize you. And then the S is that, okay, well, now let's actually do some PASTA. S was then support the people who are currently using it. Don't stop them. Say, okay, you can continue using it. I guess I'm not going to stop you. But then T is the technology evaluation. Like, now let's think about how we are going to use it. And then A is get people to move, migrate, adopt to the way the company's using it. And I think this is, the whole of the AI piece is scarier even than cloud, because there's so much more at stake. And I don't think, if we think about the risk, I don't think people quite understand what's at stake here. If you write a bit of code, the compiler doesn't change. You write a prompt and the large language model is evolving. What the answer you got today is not the answer you'll get tomorrow or in a week's time or a month's time. So I think there's actually a lot more at stake than we probably think. And I think there's, back to the education piece, there's a lot more here. I think the risk is actually, as Andrew said, the risk is actually way larger than people expect.
Yeah, and just to talk a bit more on that, like I'm talking to industry folks, especially finance, right? If we think about the finance industry, they're so secure. So now their IT, like the CIO and the cybersecurity teams, they're all like exploring to the point of how do we control individuals in our organization? How do we monitor that to make sure that security is still being held to the regard that it needs to? And now they're having to come up with new ways to figure out monitoring usage and plugging in and how they're going to restrict that type of work within their organizations. And that's a whole new movement that no one's really talking about, but it's all the work that's being done and laid out for the foundation of using this eventually.
Oh, well, I was just going to say that I've been, there is one interesting perspective here. And one thing we can't forget is that this is one of those shifts or those, big leaps, killer apps, I call them, evolution, like the iPhone or like SaaS or like all that. And when you have shifts like that, sometimes corporate leaders want to take advantage of that and try to introduce, radical changes that go along with that. I was talking, the reason why I mentioned is talking to some high level center of excellence and CIO types, and they want to try to get ahead of this and to address the shadow GPT problem by maybe having some services or something that would bring in those early adopters and give them a chance to create a community in their company that does this kind of stuff. And here I'm talking about very large companies, maybe 10,000 seats of Salesforce and up. So I think that is something that might happen as well. I think when you get these shifts, like the center of excellence guy who's sitting around saying, I can't get anybody to pay attention to me, but maybe if I had this cool prompt engineering platform I was distributing to my whole company, they'd all love me. That might happen.
Yeah, I think the pasta analogy you came up with is really good, Ian. You might do better if you could figure out how to make it work with keto. But to Vernon's point, and to the point that you came up with that analogy, I think if you look at how shadow IT has happened over the years, shadow IT happens because IT is not being responsive to the needs of the users, and they figured out a better way, right? And this is sort of this chatgpt.com, or being able to go to a web browser or on your phone and use these types of tools is one of those things where now as a sales user or as any user in the organization, I can just go do it. I don't need a license really. It's super cheap for me to do it. And that's where really I think all of the, not all, but a lot of the great ideas for how these companies can innovate with IT or AI will come from. Is from these users that are doing these jobs day to day and realize, look, I can use this tool to make my job way easier, right? And if I never ask, why would they ever tell me, right, about that? Because they're just going to make their job easier and continue to use that. But I think, especially CIOs and leaders who are thinking about how to build AI capabilities in their company really need to be looking to what are users doing today, right? Not like, hey, we have these great ideas of how to make our business more efficient, but what are actually people really doing with this, and really start there to avoid a lot of the kind of shadow IT challenges that they might come into.
So that's the A, and that's I think the A in pasta, which is you need to give the people space to actually get stuff wrong at times. And actually, in Inside Elements, we talk about ask for forgiveness, not permission. So sometimes you get it wrong, but actually you're not slowing the business down. If you're constantly worried about being laid off because you did something that didn't work, you're never going to take risks. But I think Vernon's idea of actually how do you get center of excellence to actually build a community where they can safely play and actually work out what's happening, and alongside creating some policies. Can I move the conversation on a bit because to some practical things? What could be, we talked at the beginning of the conversation about getting your data ready. What are some practical things that people are doing to get ready? Because there's some questions coming out, which is like, this is great, but what should I be doing? What should I be taking my asking my leadership to do?
So some of the things that we're encouraging our clients and even our team members is like, how are you utilizing it in a way to elevate the work that you're doing and create efficiencies, right? Just if you look at the industry as a whole, the word of the year is efficiency. And so figuring out ways, but before you just go start using it from a security perspective, right? Putting together a case saying, hey, I would love to introduce this tool. And you're talking about your A, right? I would love to introduce this tool to do X, Y, and Z, because this is going to free my time up to be able to focus on these things. Would it be okay if I explored this and tested it out? If so, then we can kind of learn about it and put some policies together around it. So allowing that space to just play around with it, but also in a way that it's helping your workload and your overall job and elevating you. That's what we're using it for today. And that's where we're encouraging our clients to test in their sandboxes or, try it out away from the workspace just to see. Some people are not good at PowerPoints. There's AIs today that can help you create PowerPoints. Some are not great at writing emails, maybe help do that stuff. So just those, start with that little stuff and then go for the bigger, because when you start with the little, the impact, to your point, right, when you're asked for forgiveness, the impact isn't that significant. So you can get your hand slapped a little bit if needed or whatever and change course, but you're also learning the tool and learning how it actually impacts and works.
So there's another question, which is, can AI help us get ready for AI? Are we seeing, is AI helping us understand what the data quality is? So are we, I haven't seen any examples of that, but are there out there, do you think?
AI can definitely help us get ready for AI. I don't know about the data piece as much. Certainly, I assume that could be one part of it, but I'm not afraid to admit that I use ChatGPT to help finesse our acceptable terms of use for AI. It made it much more clear and structured than what I had originally written. So that's just one small way that we've used it. We've certainly also used it to polish other things that we've created as far as content goes around AI, right? So I mean, that's low-hanging fruit kind of use case, but certainly that's one way to think about it. From a data readiness perspective, I think it can also sort of show you, not necessarily tell you like, hey, your data sucks, but if you try to put data in and you get crap out, that's an indicator, right, that your data sucks, right? So that's definitely one way that I've seen, I think, with the new Anthropic tool that's come out, and when we've put some data into that, it does a really good job of analyzing that data. But sometimes when you get that data back, like, it looks like great analysis, but then you start looking at the details and you're like, oh, actually those ranges are super huge and that doesn't really mean much to me. So that must mean, something, right? So I think directionally, you should definitely be using AI to help you get ready for AI.
I think the other piece, of course, is that, I mean, AI is now reading your documentation, whether it's reading the notes you're putting into a contact, whether it's reading the descriptions on your metadata. So I mean, there's a huge job there in just improving that level of documentation, because AI is not very good at nuance. It's not very good at making assumptions. It's not very good at understanding the wacky acronyms that you're using inside your company. So actually, there's quite a lot of work, I think, to be done in terms of just improving the documentation we've got, but also getting some better standards around documentation.
Yeah, I think documentation generation is a huge one, actually. I was just before we got on here, the guys over at Metazoa put out a post where they'll document a flow for you. So that's pretty cool. I mean, I think the admin function is going to be extended quite a bit by some of these built-in documentation integrations as they come along. I mean, I know Elements GPT has got some of that stuff, and Embedded's a good example too, and probably Capado. I'm going to take a look at that next week.
So let's turn our attention then to think about the sorts of skills that we need. So I mean, I think everyone's sitting here going, "Oh, is AI going to take my job?" I think the first answer is no, it's not. The A in AI is not artificial; it's augment, it's assist. But what sort of skills that should people be learning? So let's focus. Let's think about first of all what you've done inside your own organizations, and then let's think about what do you think clients are now doing. So who wants to go first on that?
I'm happy to go first with that. I think one of the big things to do is start with the basics, start to understand what exactly this is that you're using. Like there's so many resources out there at the moment, what you can use to, I mean, Trailhead's a perfect place to start to finding out the basics of AI, generative AI, all those kind of things.
You've obviously got Salesforce Ben, and you've got a number of people writing articles about generative AI. I think the difficulty at the moment is there is too much, and it's actually starting to work out where we should be focusing.
Yeah, I think on education and getting the right skills, it's basically for developers. I can speak to software engineering more. I think you need to understand the fundamentals about your language. And I think you need to take your academic training on programming as far as you possibly can, because the more that you have kind of that academic sense about how you're developing code and can talk about it, and with all the nomenclature and all of the fine descriptions that can go into how you would craft, get it to write an Apex code for you, for example. I think that the prompt engineering skills that go into that are interesting, and it goes into how well trained that person is on the subject. So I think prompt engineering is going to be for some people. It's definitely going to be for your older, more trained, more domain expert type folks. But I think prompt engineering and how you craft prompts is going to be less important maybe for some of simpler jobs that go down the chain even within the Salesforce ecosystem. So I think it's hard to, I think the answer to how to get ready skill wise is it's hard to know right now. There isn't a lot of training out there for AI other than maybe prompt engineering.
So let's get specific. If you're an admin, what should you be thinking about? So Pallavi, if you had admins coming to you, or you and saying, okay, well, how do I get ready? What should I be doing?
There we go. I was struggling to unmute myself. So I think what Vernon just said, right? I think education is the key, because there is so much information out there right now. There's also confusion of like AI versus generative AI. And I don't think a lot of people are taking time to really sink that in, that when we're talking about ChatGPT and all of this stuff around AI today, it really is around generative AI. And what does that mean? Because as I mentioned earlier, AI has been around. Like I use it every day on my phone, voice to text and things like that, right? That was 10, 15 years ago minimum when it came out. So understanding that difference, understanding like the basic foundations of LLM and what that really means. What is it when you're putting information out there? How is it being absorbed and iterative? And then what are you looking to gain out of it for your own benefits? For admins, there's things that they could elevate their careers with, right? Especially when it comes to doing more complex stuff and asking, hey, how do I write code around this? Or how do I write Apex around this? You can get some education. I would use it as a learning tool. I wouldn't use it as the answer. I would use it as a learning tool, right? And really start elevating your skill set. It's what I think of that from an admin perspective is a way for me to level up. Another source for me to go learn, play around. Admins, what they're really good at is playing around in sandboxes and trying things out. So this is another way to get answers and be more dynamic in that versus static, right? Because AI is talking back with you and you're actually in a conversation. It's kind of like having an instructor in a one-on-one way to a certain degree. Again, to Vernon's point, I would start at the baseline and like really start with the basics and the fundamentals and go from there.
You know, I have a list of like what I imagine admins could do with ChatGPT, and kind of like as I present that list, sometimes the reaction I get from people is, wow, that's what I should have been doing all along as an admin, but I'm doing all this other junk that I can't do because I can't do. So I think it maybe, you know, to look forward to it, to get excited about it, is that you can maybe think about those more aspirational things that Salesforce is always promising you can do as an admin, because some of the more tedious jobs are going to get taken care of.
Okay, so let's think about the BA, business analysis role. I think someone at the top of the hour said the BA is going to be the new superpower. So everyone's, I mean, I'm seeing a lot of people getting the BA business analysis certification, which is great news. So maybe Nick, let's start with you in terms of if I'm a BA, what sort of things should I be looking to elevate my career, or the things I should be thinking about?
Well, the first thing I would say is shocker, BA has always been the biggest superpower in IT. You know, ultimately our job is to translate things that the business wants into a system that can make those things happen, right? And so that, to me, whether you're a consultant, an admin, a BA, a whatever you want your title to be, you have to have those skills, right? It's super important, and that is a big way to level up your career if you want a career in technology. So that would just start there. Secondly, I think, you know, when we think about generative AI and what its strengths are and how it can complement what a BA does, you know, I think thinking about how you can write better user stories, right? Because we're pretty much fully transitioned into agile-ish technology like delivery now. Hopefully there aren't folks doing like big 50-page requirement documents that are going to be for a 3-year project, but you know, breaking down business requirements into bite-sized user stories that can be easily understood, that can be transferred to another team to deliver on, that are still accurate as they go down the chain, right? Those things are super important, and I think the ability of generative AI to take your raw notes as a BA and easily create user stories that are executable out of that and consistent out of that is a huge advantage, right? In understanding how you can do that. And I think the next part, and this is really one of the first things that we did here at 10K is, you know, how can I then take what we've delivered in that user story and create release notes that then can go into the change management function of this whole thing, right? And so the users can understand what we did and how we did it and why we did it. Generative AI is perfect for tasks like that, right? So, you know, as a BA, I'm thinking about, because I'm writing a lot of things, I'm thinking about, you know, how can I use this to help me not only be more efficient, but be more consistent and be better at what I'm creating.
So, I mean, AI will write really good user stories. I mean, Elements GPT is writing user stories for you. However, if you don't know what a good user story is, it's writing the first cut really quickly. If you don't know what a good user story looks like and you can't validate it back to the requirements, you can't just go, well, I guess that AI built it for me. Yeah, I'll say yes, I'll go with it. So you need to understand what good user stories are. You can't abdicate to AI. You have to delegate to AI and say, right, it's built it for me. Now let me check what you've done. Actually, that's not good. I'll fine tune it, but it's doing a lot of the heavy lifting for you. So 100% with you, Nick, there in terms of those skills. But I think someone else said earlier, AI actually augments what you do, but it punishes mediocrity. If you put in poor requirements, it will give you awful user stories. If you put in good requirements with good prompts, it will give you good user stories, and then you can refine those.
Well, guess what? That's how IT delivery works too in the real world with real intelligence, right? Not even just artificial intelligence, right? So that's not new. That hasn't changed. I think the way that we should be thinking about this is driving efficiency and more. I can do more now, right? It's not going to make me better necessarily. It might make me incrementally better at some of the things that I do. And when I say better, I think I mean more consistent, or better able to make sure that I've hit all the requirements that I need to hit from what I define as a good user story. And a lot of that I think comes through prompting and other potentially training models and things like that. But ultimately this can potentially just make me my capacity and my ability to write more user stories in a shorter amount of time, versus it's going to write all these user stories for me and I just have to write a couple of prompts.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying, Nick, but with a caveat, like coming from also as a BA first part of my life or most of my life, we know those foundations as senior BAs or senior consultants, but I want to be cautionary to those who are coming in new to these roles that this is not the answer if you don't have the foundation. So you still have to go do the legwork of learning the foundations, the basic principles of everything before you start just utilizing these tools to go get an answer. Like, I don't want someone to take our conversation today, because I agree with your points, but as someone that's green in the BA role and say, okay, I'm going to use ChatGPT and help write my user stories. I know this is a good user story, but what they might think is a good user story or the foundation of it is actually not true. Right. So I just want to caution people on that, of like the use of it. And that's why I always say it's a great way to, like, if you're Canvas, you have writer's block or something, use it as a way to go get some creative ideas. But then you still need to finesse it at the end of the day and continue to iterate yourself and level up with it, because the foundation is the key. I mean, we're talking about that. There's so many conversations that are going to be happening at Dreamforce on AI. And that's one of the things that I'm hearing even in our talk is going to be, you have to know the foundations at the core before you can use tools like this to help create efficiencies, expedite so you can do.
Yeah, and I can reinforce that kind of like from the software engineering perspective, because like what I was saying again, it's like the more educated you are in programming, the better you're going to be at using ChatGPT. I think that if you know nothing about programming, you're not going to get anywhere beyond a snake program or something like that in terms of having it generate stuff for you. So I think where I, on the other hand, as an experienced software engineer, just have it as like the co-pilot, the augmentation thing, which is I think what most people are envisioning for experienced folks. And I think the advice for the audience is please skill up on your Salesforce skills. Please learn about being an admin. Please learn about being an architect. Study the well-architected program. Get that information in your head so that when you have a chance or you have the occasion to talk to ChatGPT or something like that to figure out an architectural problem, you can approach it from a sense of knowledge and partnership, not just having the thing tell you what to do.
I mean, I think there's one area that was interesting, which I think is a game changer rather. I mean, Nick was talking about being more efficient and doing the same things faster. I think one area which I think both ourselves and Metazoa are exploring, and again, I say exploring because AI, there's so much to do, but the ability for AI to look at an entire org. There's something that as a consultant, you walk into an org and there's so many skeletons there, which you're never going to get to. The ability to go, this user story, AI, read the entire org and tell me which of the metadata I could reuse. Let me, which ones do I need to have new? Because it will actually diligently read every single thing in the org and come back with some answers. I think we're at the early stages of that, but the level of knowledge that you can get, or the analysis it will do, which a human just wouldn't do. I mean, you're not, for every single acceptance criteria, you're not going to read every single metadata item just in case. So I think that massive ability to crunch data, we don't know where in terms of where we will end up, but we're seeing the early signs of that are massive productivity improvements, whether it's a consultant, admin, an architect. And that, I think that's an interesting angle, which is more than just a slight productivity improvement. But again, back to Pallavi's comment, you can't just go, oh, well, it told me to reuse that flow. You need to know whether actually it should be flow or whether it should be an Apex trigger or whatever. So you need the knowledge to validate the answers.
Yeah, I was the other thing I was going to say on that, Ian, completely agree. And if you think about AI as part of a team member, as part of your SDLC, right? Think of them as sort of the new junior person that you brought on, right? They can still be super productive and smart and do a lot of great stuff, but you're probably going to want to review everything that they do before it goes into production, right? Um, and so even in your case, where look at a whole org, okay, well, these are the 50 new people that we brought onto the project. We're still going to have review everything that they do, right? And not just take their word for it. And so, that's sort of how I think about it, how I'd encourage others to think about it is you can be really amazed at some of the things that it can produce, right? And it can kind of lead you into this false sense of security that, wow, it's like really awesome. But if you do it enough, you start to realize like, actually it's really good sometimes, it's really bad sometimes, it's kind of in the middle most times. And you really do have to treat it like sort of let's say an associate consultant, if you would.
Probably depends as well on the state of your org. That's going to have a lot to do with it, because if you've got an org that's literally ignored every best practice going, it will just scan the worst practices and give recommendations on those. So getting the org in line as well is a big deal.
It's about org documentation. And I said, if you've reused an object and haven't changed the label, it's not going to know. It's not going to know that you've used, or there's no descriptions completed. What we discovered is the recommendations that if it's just got a label names and APIs are good, but if you put good descriptions in, we're staggered by the sort of recommendations that we'll come up with. But again, you need good descriptions. Now, the good news is most people have got nothing. So now's a chance to start writing it. But you need to think about writing those descriptions so that AI can read it. So I think there's another discipline there in terms of we need to rethink the way we write any documentation, because AI reads everything and it takes everything quite literally. So I think there's some different skill sets there.
Just imagine in the future when if somebody has a clean org, well documented, and you've got it hooked up so that you're able to use all that metadata and all the information and all the documentation as grounding information for somebody who's wants to do something. Like if a BA, this is really going to help the BAs, I think, because then they're going to be able to continue to focus on their business skills, but they're going to be able to do reality checks with the actual org they're working with a lot easier, because they're going to be able to ask questions. Can the org do this, that, or the other thing, so that they can then get an idea, of the capabilities that they're dealing with. So it's just a small example of how doing what you guys are talking about with the data quality, cleaning up the data, getting enough documentation in there, getting the metadata readable in such a way that it can be used to ground AI queries is going to give people a competitive advantage in terms of deploying enterprise applications.
So one of the questions that's come in from the chat here, which is, I mean, should AI's adoption be top down or bottom up?
You want to know how it should be or how it actually is?
But let's have a go at both of those.
Go ahead,
Right
Nick.
now, it's definitely bottom up right now. I mean, there's no question. And so I think you were alluding to this. It may both, right? It can be both. But there are certain reasons that it should be top down, especially when we're talking about organizations here. And first and foremost is because of security and data privacy and all those things. So, but I think companies can't move as fast as individuals, right? And so that's why you're seeing the sort of bottoms up approach now. And to go back again to your analogy, Ian, I think it's important for companies to understand what's really happening, and then figure out how do they pull that into a more top-down approach that's secure, trusted, and scales with the organization.
I totally agree with that. All the activities bottom up. You hear rumors about like half the programmers in the world are already using ChatGPT, but and they can do it on their phone. But I think there's also a lot of interest from the very, very top, if we can believe media and other sources. But it's probably the usual process of not being able to act as quickly as they want to from the top.
Yeah, I've seen examples where even other CEOs and leadership level are all playing around with it and figuring out how to think about. So they might not be implementing it in their orgs, but they're definitely experimenting with the technology to start thinking of, to Nick's point of like figuring out how to make it that top-down approach and introduce it into their org, knowing that their teams and their bottom-up users are already doing that stuff. It's kind of figuring out the landscape and which areas and where the fence should go.
It probably depends on industry as well, to an extent. Like if you're in a highly regulated industry like finance or security, it should be coming from top down. It shouldn't be bottom up.
Yeah, and Andrew, to that point, like the finance people I'm talking to at the big organizations in the US, it's definitely top down. Like they already have teams and initiatives where they're even sending their security teams and cybersecurity teams to certain trainings out there and giving them space to go learn and explore and start building it out to really lock that system down as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting nuances to this conversation, though, is that the bottom up activity is really driven by folks in the organization wanting to make their own jobs more efficient or easier, right? A lot of the top down activity that I see is companies wanting to have outwardly facing capabilities that they can use to market and sell their company, right? And they're not even connected at all, right? They're not really thinking about how do I make my internal folks more efficient, and which is where all the activity is really happening inside the organization. They're thinking, hey, I need to have a story around AI, and I really need to show my customers that I'm on top of this and that I'm doing these things, right? And so unfortunately, I think there's really a big disconnect right there between what's happening bottoms up and what's happening top down.
But is the intersection of that where middle managers are going, hang on, we could use AI to redesign the way my operation works, which then that ties AI at the top in policy back to, okay, well, like, now let's understand from the teams, how is this working differently? How could we make the job more efficient? So I think there's an important role there, and often middle managers are the people actually going, I think
there really is, but I think this goes back to what we were talking about earlier, where there's just so much noise here, right? And you only got 10 fingers, right, and 2 hands, so you can't do everything at once. So what are you going to do, right? As an executive who is worried about your image to the industry, you're worried about what that is, right? As a person who's hands on keyboard doing the work inside, you're worried about what that is, right? And so I do think there's an intersection there, but I think if you look at the timeline of this, that intersection happens not now, right? It's happening at some point down the road.
So was it Bill Gates said, people overestimate what will happen in 2 years and underestimate what will happen in 10. So I think that the adoption of this is going to be a lot slower than we expect. I think if we're all immersed in this and we assume everybody is, but that's not true.
Yeah, I sort of agree with that. I think the buzz will stay and the trends will be there. The adoption will only be slow because it's still so primitive, right? We haven't really figured out what it is and how to use it to what extent. And that is the main reason. It's not like when technology first comes out and we talk about the early adoption to the late adopters bell curve and where people sit. This one is where everyone's trying to get ahead of the game because they know that this is something that whether they adopt it now or they adopt it 5 years from now, they must adopt it at some point to stay relevant to a certain degree. So now it's learning, it's about who has the time and investment and the power to actually go and study it and figure it out and do that, or they want to wait and see how the market feels about it, what they learn and see examples. And when it's a little bit more templatized, then adopt it.
Hang on, so are you saying that I don't need to get started now, or I do?
It really depends on your org and where you're at. At some point, you're going to need it. So it's a matter of, based on your visions and strategy and where you are as a company, do you want to start picking on it now and experiment with it and get learning on it? Or do you want to wait till it stabilizes a bit more and we have more information and then put your resources towards it? I think those are the conversations I'm having with other industry leaders is like, yeah, I know it's happening. I know there's a lot of buzz, but I'm going to kind of see like what else is coming out before we put resources there and things like that.
Okay, so that's from a corporate perspective, but from an individual perspective, should I be taking wait and see, or should I be trying to get up to speed?
get up to speed. If you're not, don't want to get left behind. You know, I think, like I said, it's a platform shift. Did you want to ignore the Apple II? Do you want to ignore, you know, the internet? It's that level of risk that you take. And I think also I would maybe say the wait and see attitude may be a mistake, mainly because AI is easy to use if you're a developer. So that's one major consideration, is that the APIs are extremely simple. There's a lot of room for creativity and performance enhancement through prompt engineering. So I think that's a big factor that's causing this explosion to happen right now, is that the APIs are easy to use. AI is easy to infuse into existing apps. So if you're in a market where there's competitive forces, I'd say that I'd be worried to take a wait and see attitude. I think that this idea, especially if you're a big company, to have your skunk works and to have your center of excellence and other folks trying to do sanctioned policies. And also, I think I want to reemphasize this idea where I think that IT has a chance now to use this paradigm shift to put out their hand, to bring people in, to create a community within their company about this stuff, is not to be overlooked at this point.
We're getting near the top of the hour. I mean, we could sit and chat about this all day long, but I know you've all got busy day jobs. Can I just go around the room? So what do you think has surprised you most, either positive or negatively, about AI and GPT? So Pallavi?
Yeah, I think for me, being the non-technical person on this group chat panel today, you know, for me, it's how easy it is to use, right? And how simple it can be to just get in there. Like, all you need to do is go to OpenAI if you want to start there, and create a username, like a login, and start experimenting with it. And so just the ease of use and the access to it, I find that amazing, in the sense that this really does, if we talk about, you know, like just leveling the platform. So to a certain degree, right? Everyone's learning it all at the same time. It's not like there's people that are sitting and they've like 10 years of experience on this. We're all kind of learning it at the same time, and it's accessible to everyone to kind of have that same run rate. So I found that to be really amazing and very easy to use. And I think that's a plus point.
A short story. ChatGPT, OpenAI had it. They had no idea what to do with it. And they just said, well, let's just stick it out there and see what people do with it. Fun. We just never expected it to take off the way it did. Fun. So that absolutely great learning there. Vern, what surprised you most?
Well, it wasn't so much that we had another paradigm shift happen, because it's been almost 10 or 12 years since we've had one of these major shifts. So I've been kind of looking out for it. And I guess for me, it's that it can generate emotional reactions in me. So I used it to, I've been working on a coding project, and I got stuck and I felt like I would never get through it. And then I picked up ChatGPT and used it to get through that blockade. And I had I almost cried. You know, it was crazy. So, and then I think the other thing is sometimes I can get Claude, especially, I can get it trained up to produce responses to my prompts and queries that give me goosebumps. You know, like it's so exciting that they encapsulated exactly what I wanted to say, and expressed it in such a profound way that, I was like, ooh, that kind of thing. So I guess surprised by the power of it and the human-like nature of it.
Andrew?
For me, I think the speed that it's been developed and adopted by people that surprised me the most, especially because if I think back to this time last year, had any of us heard of GPT? I don't think any of us would have. I mean, the topic of AI has been kind of been researched for like nearly 60 years. So AI is not new, but then all of a sudden we've got the generative AI, and it just seemed to come out of nowhere, and suddenly everyone is either talking about it or doing something with it.
Well, Mark has redirected the entire Salesforce organization to be completely AI focused. I mean, there's some big bets being made there.
I agree with Andrew, the speed. Yeah, I've never seen anything like this in my lifetime or my career. I think back to a couple years ago when I really started trying to educate myself on machine learning because there were some really interesting things happening there, and thinking, we really need to start thinking about what we're building around machine learning and how we can think about maybe looking at past user stories and what was built and how we can predict what should be built for the next one. And we really should think about building that. And then all of a sudden, boom, like this comes. And I'm like, I'm glad we didn't do that, because this came out of nowhere and it would have just totally usurped anything that we could have thought about and is 100 times better. And just the fact that my 9-year-old knows what this is, and I've never talked to him about it. I don't take this home and say, hey, look at this cool stuff I'm doing with AI. Like, he talked to me about it the other day, just out of nowhere. So the fact that it's just penetrated our society so quickly, even more quickly than the iPhone, which is, I think Vernon called out as sort of the last big paradigm shift, is amazing. And to think that this is just the beginning, right? I don't think that this is going to follow maybe this will break the Moore's law kind of curve, but the fact that over the last year it's penetrated our society so much, and it seems like every other day there are like these amazing new capabilities coming out of these amazing new tools that people have built that can develop complete episodes of South Park, or can transcribe a webinar, or can write books, or can do deep fakes, or whatever it is, right? This is just what's happened in the last year, right? Think about then 10 years from now, right? I think, again, that to me, I agree with Mark. This is like the most important technological innovation of our lifetime, maybe any lifetime.
Bringing it full circle, when we said, should you as an individual start learning the stuff, the answer is absolutely yes. You don't want to be the person with a flip phone going, how did you get directions to there? I got my flip. You don't want to be the flip phone person. We all need to be the person going, okay, I actually can understand how to use this technology because I kind of understand how it works. This has been fantastic. Thank you so much, all of you, for taking time out of your day to not just to be on the panel, but to think about this, but also be driving the thinking about AI forward in the Salesforce ecosystem. We'd love to have you back. We'll do another GPT Dreaming in probably 6 months, and life will be dramatically different. But we'd love to see the journey we've all been on, and hopefully we'll see many of you, and see all of you, but many of the people who are on the call see you all at Dreamforce.